All right. Hey, everybody. Can you hear us? Let us know.
Mulligan.
Let us know if you can hear us. Do.
Take it from the top.
Yes, we'll take it from the top if we
I
can.
think we do 6 times a week.
As soon as we know that
work
people
at
can
this
hear us.
point.
Yeah, okay, there's yays. Okay, so
Okay.
now that you can hear us, guys, welcome to Reverse the Verse, our special January subscriber edition. As a perk to subscribers, we do one of these every month where we bring in an esteemed guest and take questions specifically from subscriber chat. Today's special guest is Technical Director of Content,
Yep.
Mr. Sean Tracy, and I knew that before. I didn't just ask him. We're going to take questions from our subscriber chat only, and from a thread that exists in Subscribers Den. While we're collecting questions, why don't you tell people what you do,
Sure.
and how you do it, so they can form their questions around relevant topics.
Sounds good.
He does it very well.
So, technical director, specifically of content. So everybody knows, we have upwards of 4 technical directors across the company. We have 2 in Frankfurt, 1 in the UK, and then 1 here. So I'm the representative here. And again, if nobody's really aware of what a technical director role sort of does, you basically hit the amount of expertise that you retain for whatever your role is at the highest level that you can basically get it to. Typically, a technical director will be an expert programmer by some description. So Karsten Wenzel and Marco Corbetta are our technical directors in Frankfurt. So they're the engine technical directors. Essentially, how they're organizing how the engine is being created, what we're going to do with the engine, how we change it, and really major architectural modifications, things like this. Then we have Derek Senior, and he's the programming director within the UK, but typically your programming director is actually your technical director. So since we have so many different engineers in the UK working on gameplay systems, all the the mini PU features, he is the tech director out there, and then it's myself over here in this time zone. Now, what I'm more responsible for in the last little while, anyways, is all the data that's going into the game. We basically have 2 very important directories within our build, and one is code, and the second is data. So every single asset that you see within the game, whether it's a character, ship, particle effect, sounds, things like that, I'm responsible for that. And really, it's basically anything that comes out of some sort of DCC tool and goes into the engine or goes into the game, that's up to me. So we keep calling them pipelines and things like this, so I've got to manage all the pipelines. And I'm trying to deprecate the word pipeline and just call them checklists, because it's so much easier for people to understand. Like, pipeline is such this nebulous sort of like, oh, I work on the pipeline. But no, really, you work on a set of checklist items that is like, goes here, goes here, goes here, finish that, and all those interdependencies. So, yeah, I'm making sure that we're using the engine the best we can, making the content the fastest way we can. I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's not a job interview, so I guess I'll just stop there.
What's a DCC tool?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's a digital content creation. So it's like 3ds Max, Maya, XSI. Well, I don't even know if that exists anymore. ZBrush, DCC, Photoshop.
I mean, I knew. I was just asking for.
Yeah, no,
Sure
of course,
you
sure.
did.
All right. Our first question comes from our subscriber thread, since there aren't any questions in subscriber chat just yet. This thread says, the Procedural Planet tech demo looked great.
Great.
What are some of the challenges in getting us to the point where players can actually land anywhere on Crusader?
There are so many challenges. Wow. I mean, that's a pretty broad question. So I guess I'll pick a couple points that we're dealing with right now. One of the hardest things to deal with, obviously, is the physics of this. So not so much in terms of the scale, but you can't. Okay, so the way physics really works within the game, you've got a bunch of render mesh, and then you've got a physical proxy, which is a way lower res representation of whatever you want to collide with. The reason it's got to be so much lower res is that you are doing so many more calculations on that than you are on a render mesh or something like this, because eventually you'll just render it. But in physics, we're interacting with it, we're shooting things at it, we're crashing into it, we're doing all kinds of different things. So the problem is with a planet of 10,000 kilometers or something like that, you cannot possibly load that entire physics mesh all the time. And even worse, even if you tried to do that, the sheer count of that, even if it was lower res, would be so high So what we have to do is dynamically load this physics, and we've got to load it on a sort of a per client basis, because you typically on a server you'll actually load all your physics data all at once. You'll have it all just sitting there. You won't stream the physics in or out. It'll just be sitting there, and obviously we can't do this on a 10,000 kilometer planet that has mountains and hills and all sorts of different things. So that's one of the biggest challenges that we have. But we've already got it working, which is pretty neat to know. I don't know when we'll show that, but yeah, we've got something quite nice working for that. So we'll calculate it on a per client basis. So that was one of the biggest hurdles to actually making this playable for the players, because obviously if you don't have physics on a terrain, you fly right through it and it'll kind of ruin the whole experience. So yeah, that was one of the bigger ones. On top of that, of course, is just the visuals of the planet itself. I mean, how does that look? How does it look? And again, the scale is just insane. How does it look when you're 300,000 kilometers out from that planet? You've got to go from this planet just inheriting 1 pixel on the screen to it taking up the entire screen, to it being like you are inside of a level, So being able to transition through the atmosphere, making that look hyper real was really, really challenging.
How many LEDs are involved in that?
It's actually way more complicated than that, and I wish I could say there was like 6 LODs or something like this. No, there are so many different levels of processing that happens on the way in. So sure, there's a bunch of LODs as you're approaching, but once you get in there, it's a dynamically tessellated object. So essentially what you're doing is you're only going to tessellate the objects that are really close to you, or the sectors even that are really close to you. And most game engines have a terrain system that works this way. Unreal has it, CryEngine has a base sort of terrain system that works on this this dynamic amount of tessellation. The trick is to get that to convolve around a sphere, first of all, and then second of all is to be able to synchronize this all over the network, right? So, and again, that's got to lend itself to physics. That's got to go across different clients. Yeah, there's a lot of challenges when it comes to this. And then maybe the last one that I'll talk about is the actual objects on the surface itself. Now, I'm not talking about like procedural objects or like trees and rocks and things like this. I mean landing zones. If you have an idea, like to give you an idea, Area 18, that level right now, we're talking 4 to 6 gigs of data within that level. So imagine flying up to one of these planets, which is pretty heavy by itself, and then also having to load that landing zone on the way in. To be able to stream that amount of data, you can absolutely do this, but can you do it seamless? Can you make it look like it's not just pop, bunch of objects sort of streaming in? That's a huge challenge. So that's something that we're working on the engineering front with these things that Chris talks about on occasion, called object containers and these sort of things. So we've got a very unique game where we basically have to be able to stream everything out and everything in at runtime. So it's a very, very challenging thing to do. There is very few level loads, so you can't just sit there and load everything behind the scenes. So
challenging, but we have our plan in place.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's starting to work.
Yeah,
so
right.
Yeah,
Carl Jones, our COO here at CIG, we had a saying when we both used to work for Crytek, and that was difficult takes a day and impossible takes a week. So this one is on the level of impossible, right? But we're absolutely going to achieve it, right?
Sadly, that's going to be the headline.
Right.
They will
yeah, I say a week,
else
but
we
it's
say
like
today will be
yeah,
ignored.
confirmed planets are done in a week. No, that's not true.
No, I was thinking the
That's
impossible
such a
planets
lie.
are impossible.
Okay. What can you tell us about Physicalized EVA? I know there were some expectations that it might be in 2.1 originally, because you came on this show and said it might be in 2.1.
No, and it was, and we pulled it out actually.
We pulled it out.
Yep, we pulled it out on purpose.
Where are we at with that now?
It looks like it's definitely going into. Well, I say definitely. Wow, I am so gonna not say definitely.
Yes.
It's in our branch for 2.2 right now.
There you go.
So it's basically the same that we were at with 2.1. However, there's been a ton more work that's been done on it. One of the biggest problems was it has nothing to do with crashes, has nothing to do with performance, has everything to do with the way it feels, like the control of it. Because fundamentally, we changed the way that the character is getting locomoted around when you're in the EVA. You are now, we call it a driven ragdoll. It's a similar system to, if anybody's seen these animation systems called Morphine, or in FIFA actually is a really good example. They use a very similar system where there's a level of driven ragdoll. So you are we call it an articulated entity. So basically you're a set of rigid bones, right, that is getting driven around, but you've got to blend animation on top of just physical impulses that is moving it around. Whereas the older EVA, and what everybody's using right now, is an animation-driven EVA. So we say entity move here, entity move here, and entity move here, but the animation just plays based on how you're moving. It's it's actually pretty simple. It's just, you're moving forward, well, animate like this. You're moving backwards, well, animate like this. So with driven ragdoll, it's a lot more tricky because of all the physics that gets involved with it. So the reason we want to do driven ragdoll is we want the body to react to things in 0G as you would expect them to react. Now, I think a lot of people saw some of the fun videos that came out of the initial implementation of it, right? Where we hadn't tightened up a whole lot of the limits. So like somebody could go near a ship, and if it hit their head would bend almost, all the way backwards and things like this. So again, right, it was all about scaling those physics impulses and those sort of things, but really getting the control better. Because our frame of reference changed so drastically between the old EVA and the new EVA, and what I mean when I speak of frame of reference is, and it's something I talked about before, where we would use the origin of the character, or is, like write down, this is a character, and this is the feet of the character, and in the middle of the feet is the origin, right? We've just got 0, 0, and that's where our origin is. But when you're in EVA, actually your origin changes. Your center of mass becomes dynamic, which is quite cool. Usually it's around the hips, but because it moves around a little bit, that makes controlling it really tricky, because you've got to have something that is saying, okay, this is my forward direction. Which way is forward, which way is up, which way is down, these sort of things. So yeah, there's been a lot of great check-ins on it, and it feels so many levels better than it initially felt. So will there be bugs? Probably, but we'll have to cross those bridges when we get there.
Why don't we just fake it?
Why don't we just fake EVA? Well, that's what we had before, right? It was faked EVA. And, everybody was happy with that. I'm not saying that it was awful. But visually, I thought it was awful. Because here's my problem, is when you pitch or you sort of rotate, you were rotating around the feet. And again, we only had some limited free flight, and even in the mini PTU, are you really sitting there staring at a guy doing a lot of EVA? Not so much, but let's say you're in a gunfight with a guy, and all of a sudden he presses E, and he starts rotating around like this. It just looks stupid. It looks fake, and that's not what we want. And most people would say, okay, how about you just offset that origin to the hips, and then just rotate around that. Well, that's a little bit tricky, because actually the animation system is assuming that origin is between the feet. So it's better to go change it to an articulated entity, get all these bonuses of actually being a driven ragdoll. So like, flying into stuff and your arms reacting, your head reacting, and mostly your legs reacting. Than it was just to continue to fake it, if that makes any sense. The other big win that we get out of this is another system that we worked on sort of in concert with the physical EVA, and we called it fall and play back in the crisis days, but for us it's more like fall and play and fall. So what it means is, and the implementation is going to get a little bit bigger, as you transition in and out of gravity is kind of our big thing. Right now, how it works is, as soon as your pivot comes within some sort of gravity volume, boom, we just drop you down and you land on your feet, whether or not you were coming in head first, whether or not you were coming back first, or anything like this. So what I wanted to do with it was basically give you a range that you would be able to land on your feet, essentially. So right now I think we've set it to 20 or 30 degrees, and it's like a little cone. So again, if you consider the pivot of the character, you can be rotated. I think it's 30 degrees. You can be rotated sort of 30 degrees forwards, backwards, sideways. You're basically within this cone of I can land on my feet. So when that happens, you transition into 0G, boom, you're able to actually land. But if you come in head first, what do we do, right? Now, we could try to animate, a bunch of different directions, but this gets really heavy to maintain, and also it doesn't really look right. So instead what we do is when you transition into gravity, we set you to ragdoll, driven ragdoll. Well, you technically already are if you're in 0G. But we kind of take the control away. We put you already have mass, so we put gravity to you. So what will happen is you lose control a little bit. But if you came in head first, you actually ragdoll. You're under gravity affection, and you will fall, blam, and oh, don't hit the table because the microphone will blow. You land on the ground, whatever, in ragdoll, and your arms will go all over the place or whatever. And then what the fall and play portion of this is, we will blend whatever pose you've landed in into a get up animation. So we have 8 different get up animations, and they're just sort of different ways that the body could land. So it's on the belly, on the back, on the side, sort of crouched down. And then we will blend into a get up animation, and you will just get up from your fall. So there's a lot of gameplay that can come out of this, and I know this sounds like very you wouldn't see the direct impact of some gameplay with this, but if you consider things like an FPS level, or even within a station that has gravity generators. So let's consider you've got 2 different teams and you are fighting in this sort of area. Now, if you are in communication with your team and you control some sort of gravity generator or something like this, you can use this very much to your advantage. If they're in, let's say we have a hangar and a gravity generator, you've got the other team in the hangar and they're flying around all over the place. They're going to town on your guys because they've got 0 gravity. They can go upside down and all these sort of things. You get that other team way up in the air and you tell your other guy to throw on gravity. Guess who's all falling down and they have to get up, and you've basically got about 5-6 seconds of just picking them off, right, as they're getting up off the ground. And then additionally, right, there's other things that we could build on. I'm not sure if the designers have really fleshed this out yet, but how much better are you at transitioning from 0 gravity to gravity? Is that 30 degrees actually for you more like 40 degrees? Is this a character progression thing? Is this something that you can have an item for? Do you have thrusters on your suit that can help you with this? Are you like a cat? Can you always land on your feet? There's all sorts of little bits of gameplay that can go into this. So that was a really long-winded answer for kind of what's going on with physical EVA. But again, it's a real exciting thing because I don't think it's been done before. Not like this anyway.
8 different get-up animations?
Eight different directions, yeah.
I only have 1 get-up animation. It involves grunting.
Grunting and there's sounds. No, that's my sit-down too.
All right, this leads us into the next question.
Sure.
How are FPS animations coming, specifically with the unification between first and third?
Really well. There was a great thing that happened about 2 months ago. Our animation director, Stephen Bender, had gone out to Frankfurt and did a lot of direct work with our animation R&D programmer. So, and just so you guys know a little bit of history on this too, we did work together at Crytek, the R&D animation engineer, Stephen Bender and myself. And there was a lot of guys within Crytek, and we had tried to unify this for Crysis 2 and even for Crysis 3. And we were all pretty much set in the way that you can't. You just can't. There's no way to do it. You're always going to be chasing your tail. What looks good in first person doesn't look good in third person, vice versa. But we made a change, and I mean, I got to leave a little bit of magic. So I'm not going to say exactly what it was. But I mean, we solved the problem, and by we, it was really, Ivo Herzeg was the Frankfurt engineer that really kind of 1 line of code solved it. And it was interesting. Like, I made a little meme for him, like it was like, 1,000 man hours I do in 1 line or something like that. But yeah, we solved this, and the nice thing about it is it feels like an FPS again. Is the thing. It feels like the weapon is in the right place. It's not bouncing around. You'll probably see, and even if you go look at the older videos of the FPS before any of this implementation kind of went in, the weapon's bouncing around everywhere. It doesn't really look like the solidified first-person shooter. At the same time, we didn't want to have static weapon. We just don't want to have floaty weapon. Chris talks about it all the time. He just doesn't want a weapon sitting there floating in your view, right? He wants it to feel like you are holding it, but at the same time, it's got to feel super responsive. And the real problem with it is that in a first-person shooter, the weapon is the only thing that communicates your movement to you. So if you're turning, for example, right, that weapon needs to cant and things like this. A good one is cover. So when you go into cover, you can't tell if you're sort of poking your head out or if you've just moved the weapon, So it's the only thing that really informs your movement in first person. So if you're juking, if you're doing things like this, the weapon needs to move, and that needs to translate to, oh, okay, that's how my character is moving. A third person game doesn't have this problem because you're staring at the character. You know exactly what he's doing. But a first person game definitely does, because you don't know necessarily what your feet are doing, what your whole body is doing. So it gets tricky in cover, but I would say that it's going really well, probably better than it ever has been, especially since that change, because we've made a bunch of adjustments based on that will make developing stuff even easier. A good example of this is we've added an extra layer of animation. There's actually like 4 or 5 different layers that are happening when we're in first person. But one of the big ones is this weapon hands overlay. It's a clip that we can put on. So essentially what it does is we have very similar animations for like rifles, but we might have different sizes of rifles. So we might have a sniper rifle, which actually I can't hold back here. I'm actually going to have to hold over here. Now my hand poses haven't changed dramatically, but they've changed enough that actually we have to do something. So what you'll see is we've got this extra layer of animation that actually all we do is we just put one animation to move that hand to that location. We link everything up with IK and we're good to go. So what this all means is that we can make more weapons faster without having to uniquely animate every single one of them. That's a big win. So yeah, a lot of this stuff. Then and sorry, I know I just keep talking on and on.
That's why you're here. This is our freebie
the start
episode.
the start stops have made super good progress. So this was some interesting stuff that Stephen Benner actually came up with some really good ideas on. And then the jukes themselves are still a bit of a challenge. We've got them and they're responsive now. And so everybody knows, like the original implementation of the jukes felt super unresponsive. That was our really biggest problem with it. And just being totally open about it, you would play on mouse and I'm a mouse and keyboard guy, so you'd be playing on mouse and keyboard and you would be strafing right, and then all of a sudden you would press left and something would happen, and then eventually you would end up going left. And even having 6 frames of delay or 7 frames of delay was enough that it felt super sluggish, was the problem. And that was one of our concerns in releasing it, because if you didn't see what was happening in third person, if it was awesome in third person. If we were making a third person game, we would have been done. Like, that was easy. But in first person, that
Done
communication,
with the
done with the on the animation side.
Gonna get me in trouble.
Yeah, no kidding. In first person, it's so much harder to communicate that movement. And most people are so used to Call of Duty or Battlefield or something like this that is this instant response. And we have to keep that instant response, because otherwise it's not that fun. Mm-hmm. You feel like your character is controlling you rather than you controlling your character. So yeah, there's been some great stuff on the start stops. Then additionally, you probably saw that there's new locomotion sets within the mini PU. So those are doing really, they're working really well. The other thing that's kind of exciting about them, and I mean, it depends who you are to see how exciting this is, but there's 3 cycles within them. So these are 3 cycle runs, 3 cycle walks. I know that sounds like, oh, yeah, and what I mean 3 cycles is, left, right, left, right, left, right. So, correct? So you go left, right, left, right, left, right. The reason that's good is that we can actually make it not completely symmetrical. So basically the second step on that is just there's a tiny bit of a shoulder dip in it or something like this. They tend to look a lot more realistic than just a single cycle run, because a single cycle run is like perfect all the time. You never ever see anything different. But if you go into the game right now, you'll see the one that's the most obvious is the backup, and it's probably a little too obvious, and we'll probably chill it out. But when you're running backwards, you'll notice that the shoulders kind of dip down into it. It's only on one of the cycles, but it looks really good. I think it looks a lot more real. Is the point?
I'm getting a special telepathic message from Hennessy. Please stop hitting the table. Please stop hitting the table.
Oh, is that me?
Please
I'm
stop
sorry. I get excited.
All right. Next question is about turrets on our multi-crew ships. right now they're not the most responsive. They're not the funnest, the most fun gameplay experience at the moment. What are we doing to improve turret performance?
A lot of testing, really. So we're trying a lot of different ideas. Chris has a really good direction on this, where what we want to try, and this is something that we're just doing internally right now. The turrets, as they work right now, you sit in it, you've got a crosshair, and you are moving crosshair, and that's how it's moving with you now. The problem with this is that it's actually not like anything else in your ship. Like if you're sitting in the pilot seat, right, you've got a nice floating reticule, everything sort of follows up behind that. What we want to do is implement that, have it sort of like a floating type reticule that the turret will sort of catch up to. Problem with that is the responsiveness, right? You've got to make sure that that moves fast enough. And if it doesn't move, if it moves too fast, it feels super fakey. If it moves not fast enough, it doesn't feel responsive enough. And I'm not, there's no promise that we're going to do this. We're going to try it internally, and we're going to see if that feels any better. Is the thing. The other thing that I think will help a lot is just a little bit of feedback on where your ship is facing. And this has everything to do with UI, which way your ship is facing, which way your turret is facing. I mean that's pretty much all I know right now on the multi-crew turrets. But I know there's guys in the UK really looking at this pretty hard right now. I'm just not super involved in it. That's all.
Okay. Hair. Character hair. What are the possibilities of Star Citizen using something like Tress FX or the new AMD technology Pure Hair? What's our plan for hair?
So I don't know too much about Pure Hair. I know that they've released an update to Tress FX, and we evaluated Tress FX. And here's a little bit of history again on when Tress FX 1.0 rolled out. I was part of the Crytek team that did the implementation originally for Tress FX into the CryEngine. So basically AMD had come over with all their work on Tomb Raider, and we had done a tech demo called the Ruby tech demo, and you can take a look. You can look it up. This is something I worked on with Elphonic, actually. Now, not to at all speak bad about the tech, it's very, very cool stuff. However, we've got so many characters on screen, and for us to go with just one character having ridiculously, granular simulated hair, and then everybody else in the scene kind of having, crappy poly soup kind of hair, doesn't really make a ton of sense to us. The other thing that is a worry, of course, is just the performance implications. So in all the games that have used Tress FX, and again, I'm not saying it's like a bad performing system, but it is not a system for 40 characters on screen. It's not a system for 60 characters on screen. It's really a system for fur of a hero character. It's really a system for hair of a hero character. And again, in something like Tomb Raider, pretty much one character on screen, right? And you may have enemies and stuff like this, but generally you are only looking at one person. Do we need super advanced level hair simulation? I would argue probably not even, right? I would say that there's things that we can do now with the item ports and these, we call them skeleton extensions, with pretty advanced rigging, that will make it a lot easier for us to do a lot of hairstyles without having to sort of resort to a GPU hair or a Tress FX or I think NVIDIA Hair Works or stuff like this. So I can't say no for sure, but we have evaluated what was there, and it just wasn't suitable for what we wanted. And the real trick with those hair systems, and it's just from past projects having worked with them, is getting the hairstyle you really want. Works real good for long flowy hair that's real straight, or even like a ponytail or something tied back. But as soon as you want some sort of real retro cut or something that looks very unique, it gets tricky. It really does. And the other thing that we have to consider is the zero gravity of all of this. So Tress FX deals with that, but it looks a little weird. I mean, if I'm totally honest, right? How it ends up simulating is not what you would really expect. So that really matters to us. With all that said, we are going to have hair. We do have hair on the characters right now.
Confirmed.
The other, and there's one little other limitation in this, and that's the character customization. So because we want to have characters customize not only their hair color, maybe the style, maybe the length. You know, there's a really great Korean MMO out right now. They just released their character creator, which is one of the best out there. And not to plug them or anything like that, I have zero involvement in it whatsoever. I'm very impressed with the level of customization that they brought it to. Is called Black Desert.
I was going to say, don't talking about Black Desert.
Why not?
I played with that for like 15 minutes, so they just released the character.
Yes.
And I had this weird, like, distorted Eric Stoltzen mask thing.
Yeah.
And then you go into game with it, it's like, "Wah!"
But in terms of hair customization, I've never seen a better system.
Yeah.
Never seen a better system.
very
Could you do
shiny,
that with
though.
Tress Effect?
Everything's very
Sure, it's shiny hair, but look at all the stuff you can do to it,
Yes.
right? You've got control points. You can pull out the hair. You can make it longer, shorter. You can crimp it. You can do all these things with it. And it's hilarious me talking about hair because I've got very little of it. And, you know, like my
less.
expertise in hair is pretty limited. But yeah, we want the characters to be able to customize it. And again, there's so many settings on the Tress Effects hair that we would have to then persist and serialize. It's probably just too much.
Gotcha. It's important because all these systems won't exist in a vacuum.
Right.
It has to be how they will integrate with everything else that we're doing.
Yeah, and that is you know the classic tech director role is that we've got to make sure it works with kind of everything. And you can be the buzzkill. Unfortunately, you're a bit of a killjoy sometimes, where it's like, this would be an amazing feature in this one little situation, but yeah, okay, but what's it do here? What's it do here? What's it do here? So.
I'm just bummed. It sounds like there's not going to be a Tomb Raider where she goes to space.
Yeah, right. I'm sure it can be supported. It's not, you know, it's just, is it worth implementing and then changing yourself?
I'm just happy you finally confirmed that we will have hair in the game.
Yes.
Because we can write the lore that everyone in the future is the same bald man.
Exactly.
Like a
Same
forever
face,
thing,
same
yeah.
bald man, same eyes.
Some disease that eradicated the hair
Sure,
genome.
It
we're
turns
just
out that's
all.
the perfect evolution of man is a bald guy.
We're all Powder. Remember Powder? That was a bad movie. All right, matchmaking. Do you have anything to do with matchmaking or our lobby system?
Not really.
Yeah, I didn't
no.
think so. That's why
I mean, well, little bits and pieces. Like I work with Jason Ely on some of the game side stuff, but I mean, there hasn't been too much going. Like, what's the question about it? Like, where's matchmaking?
About what the future of matchmaking will be and stuff. I didn't think.
Right, and that's actually it's not a bad question. Really, what we've and I'm not even sure if it's in yet, is the ELO rating. So once the ELO rating is online, and you know, it's funny because a lot of people think that, just a little bit of trivia for you, the ELO rating is actually a guy's last name. It's not an acronym. It's not ELO. It's a guy's last name that came up with it. So just so you guys know. But ELO rating is pretty important so that we can actually matchmake between similarly skilled players, because that's kind of the biggest concern, right? Is so that you don't end up with a bunch of beginners in with the super expert guys, right? So, I mean, I expect that to come online, but you'll likely see that come online as Arena Commander makes further progress. But again, the real focus is the mini PU, really, right now. And once we've got, you know, sim pods within the mini PU, then I think you'll see a lot more work and a lot more game types in Arena Commander.
Will bullets from FPS guns be affected by artificial gravity or the lack thereof?
Right now they're not. They could be. I mean, that's a system that's already in the CryEngine. This bullet drop is basically the term. And whether it's artificial gravity or real gravity, I think it's all technically artificial gravity because, I mean, it is a video game. So it's all artificial. But we could. They're just, right now we haven't been working ever at ranges that it would make sense, right? Yeah, I'm not even going to try to spit out numbers, but, you know, most of our first-person combat scenarios don't really extend past 200 yards or 300 yards right now. Not to say that they won't ever, because things like PlanetSide and stuff like that will change that drastically. But currently, there just hasn't been really a reason for it.
Gotcha. They're freaking out about the ELO rating right now.
Oh, what? That did everybody know that? And I just like dropped the trivia, and I'm like, oh, I'm so smart because I know this.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us what ELO rating is? You said it was named after a guy, but what is the ELO rating?
It's a way to it's a way to give a single number to your skill set, and this is based on kills, deaths, time played. There's a formula, actually. It's just like, if you check the Wikipedia, I think it's just a formula. So, but again, I'm not really that involved in that side of it. But I looked it up because I asked everybody one time. I'm like, what does ELO stand for? I thought it was an acronym. And nobody had the answer, but Google did.
Gotcha. Okay. How do you plan, or do you, sorry, how do you plan to do, if it's possible, to do with a CryEngine for transferring the mass inertia of a ship to its passengers? I think a variation of this question I've seen before is pilots will red out and black out. Will those effects transfer to the people who are riding passengers in the ships?
It totally could, and that's a really good question, and we've talked about this a lot. And let me sort of take you. And again, I always turn these into a story or like a history. Okay, so
we're 2/3 of the way through.
The best way I can explain it was that with with the G forces, we. There was an initial implementation of how the pilot reacted to G-forces, and it was pretty crappy, if I'm honest. The next thing that we did was re-implement it, or refactor it, basically, so that it uses a blend space. And what a blend space means is that these G-force reactions are now parametrically driven, which is super cool because you can pass the G-force data, whatever the value is, you can pass that to a single animation set, and it's just going to blend based on whatever that might be. The question that came up, and this is now a little bit more to the actual the topic, the question that came up during that is, what happens in a local physics grid ship like a Constellation? Does the pilot sit there reacting to the G-forces whilst he's got co-pilot standing literally right next to him, not doing anything? And what we ended up coming up with was actually within the local physics grid ship, no, you would not actually feel any of this gravity change. If it was artificial gravity, what do I know? I'm not a physicist by any stretch of the imagination. When you're in a ship that has artificial gravity, it's going to compensate for this effect.
Star Trek called them inertial dampers.
Or inertial dampers, right. Yeah. Now, where we do want some sort of reaction, and I mean, does this make, because there is a kind of a problem with the design here. When you're a Constellation pilot, you still red out and black out, but yet you're not doing any real G-force reaction. So does that really make a lot of sense? Not really, but it's balanced is kind of the thing. What we do want, though, is damage reactions. So Star Trek, shaking in the seat, whatever. But then we want people that are standing there to have some level of reaction. We can't take control away from the player, but have some level of character reaction to the damages and the things that are going on within the ship. Do we have inertial dampers or anything like that? Not really, not right now. And how it all works is just if you're within that physics grid, you basically don't react to those things.
Would that extend to items that are in the ship as well, like cargo or stuff like that? So,
because I mean, if you think about it, yeah, if we start doing that with the player, we'd have to start doing that with the whole cargo. And if your cargo's not strapped down or whatever, and we don't want to have to force the character or the players to go to the back of the ship and get a tie down out and strap it down, that'd be super silly.
It's one of those things where we take it to the edge of realism, and then we have to bring it back to someplace where it's fun.
Totally. I say this one thing all the time. If you want realism, go sit on the bus bench and tell me how fun that was. I mean, it's games after all.
We're going to take it as close to realism
stuff
as we can, and then bring it back to the point where it becomes fun.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I remember Wing Commander had the same exact issue way back then. Your ship had, in the fiction, acceleration absorbers, and in the first builds, if your acceleration absorbers got destroyed and you tried to accelerate, your guy just died. And it was really, that makes sense,
not very fun.
But it's not that much fun.
Yeah, it's not very fun at all.
Right now on Crusader, players that are inside the local physics grid can't be killed. I think it was a bug fix. Pilots were getting shot through. So they made anybody inside there invulnerable. And right now, when somebody jumps on a ship, you can't shoot them, you can't do anything, you can't fight. People on Korea will run into a ship as a sort of a safe zone.
As they're
yeah, it's like, I'm safe. I'm safe now.
That's funny. Are we going to fix that?
What's the plan
definitely.
for that?
Well, yeah, absolutely, we're going to fix that because, of course, we want combat on the ships. And I'm more thinking larger ships rather than, Constellation or Retaliator sort of thing. But yeah, we want combat to be able to go on the ships. If somebody's trying to board your ship, you want to be able to defend it. If there's people on your ship hanging out in a seat that you want to get rid of, then you get rid of them. Here's the trick, is that, and it's interesting, we just had a meeting about this morning. What we have to implement is a pierceability system for our item components. So this is something that I'm sure Chris will talk about, or something like this, where we have shield, hull, and then the component within there, and we need some level of pierceability for the projectiles. However, the way the pierceability system works in the engine right now is basically can I go through it or can I not? Right. So if I say yep, you can go through the armor, well, I all of a sudden start getting lasers in the cockpit. I got the pilots getting shot out every 2 seconds. So basically we had to reel that back. And we've got to put a sort of a deeper system into place with the pierceability, not just a logic check where it's, can I go through it or can I not, where there's actually a thickness to it. There's going to be certain areas in the ship that we just won't do that with. A good one will likely be the cockpit. I can't confirm that for sure. I'm not a designer by any stretch of the imagination. We've actually, literally the end of that meeting was, okay, design, go off and you figure out exactly how you want that to work and you come back and let us know. And then we will put it in as such. So yeah, that was kind of a quick fix to make it so that, yeah, you weren't just getting shot out of your seat. The real annoying one to me was when you were sitting in a turret and like somebody was shooting at you with a pistol or something like that, and then that would shoot you out. And I mean, that's really cool in Battlefield if you've got like an M50, 50 cal sniper rifle and you shoot through some glass or something. But I mean, I would think that space glass is pretty strong, if you're going to have it or as something to this
You heard it here first.
Space glass is strong.
Pretty strong.
Pretty strong.
Transparent aluminum.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, the long term to that is absolutely you will have combat within the ship, but we don't want you to get shot with a laser from outside into the ship just randomly.
Okay. The transparent aluminum comment takes us to our next question.
Cool.
Almost as if we planned it. Hello, Sean.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
That was it.
Who was it?
As far as I understood, the CryEngine does not natively support rendering the world into subframes. For example, as far as this person knows, the Car Chihuahua was intended to have a non-transparent cockpit with just a drawing of the outside
Just a
world in a
screen.
holographic manner.
Right.
Is that still something possible? It would be a great way to enhance immersion.
No, and it's a great question, a great comment that he, and he's right. We didn't have the idea. There was just never a need for it. Of subframes, or basically like a picture-in-picture is kind of what he means. We want it, absolutely, and there is inherently in the engine there is stuff that's doing something very similar. And the reason I say something that's doing it very similar is stereo does something very similar. A stereoscopic rendering, or more specifically the post-stereo technique, not the dual rendering, but post-stereo technique, will render the scene twice. But, it doesn't render the scene twice. It renders the scene once and then actually generates that second image based on all the stuff in that first frame. So we could do something to this effect where we're taking that stereo render, whatever the second image would be created, and actually map that down to a poly. The trick is that there's so many screen-based, and now that we're camera relative rendering, there's so many camera-based and screen-based effects that we do. I'm hitting the table again. Post effects on the screen that won't work very well if you're trying to do a picture-in-picture sort of thing. So you can't do these full-screen post effects on this tiny little thing. But that's good because there's other games that get around it by not having any color on that, not having any normal mapping on that. You can make another image with less render passes pretty quickly, and we really need an implementation case that makes a lot of sense to do that with. One of the biggest things I want to do this with, and this hasn't come from any designer, but I've talked about it a million times, is that I hate the fact that as a pilot, I don't know where my gunners are looking. I have zero idea. And if I had a tiny little picture-in-picture of both turrets, or even one that I could select where the guy was looking, and I got some sort of remote view, that would be amazing. So we're going to move that direction so that there is this sense of, it's really to get better teamwork going together in the ship, so that one, that you have a gunner, two, where he's looking, so you can actually pilot in a way that makes sense, and three, we need things like security cameras and things like that. So it'd be really cool to have, if you're on a transport ship or something like this, to have another security camera in the back, so you can actually monitor your ship. Capital ships are absolutely going to need this, so that you can actually check different areas of the ship
for borders and stuff like that.
Exactly, without actually changing the full screen render. And then further examples of that is maybe a cockpit that's completely closed. How does that work? So there is ways to do it. It is absolutely not inherently supported in the CryEngine. It's not something that it had ever had the idea of doing. But there has been other licensees, not just CIG, that had interest in that and have done it. A good example of a licensee that did it was Big Red Button when they did Sonic Boom. They actually made split screen rendering. So that is the exact same concept as having a little picture-in-picture. So it's all about using all that data that you get from one frame and compositing an image based on some of the information that you can reproject onto that new one. And in any game, they're usually a frame delayed. They're usually one frame behind. So
Gotcha.
Whether or not people notice, that's a different story. So I hope that answers that. It's kind of a roundabout.
You only go roundabout. It's okay.
That's true.
That's right.
That's true.
Well, here's a pretty simple, direct question. We'll see how concise an answer you can give to this one. It'll be a personal Sean Tracy challenge.
All right, let's do it.
With the release of the Oculus Rift and the HTC Vive this year, we were wondering if Squadron 42 Episode 1 is planned to have official VR support upon release.
Yeah, I can't answer that. I can't, because actually I don't know. Do we have VR support? Sure. Is it an expected thing to support for Squadron 42 release? I expect so, but it's really more of a question for Chris. I can't. This is less of a technical question, because absolutely we could. But then again, everything's possible. Just a matter of time and money. But yeah, so can't really answer that, and that's about as concise as it gets.
Let's get that one on a tip for the chairman.
All right. Going through questions. Folks like Sean wouldn't have anything to do with the SciTech pre-order, stuff like that. So
No.
looking for questions that are actually relevant to Mr. Tracy.
Although I can comment on the SciTech pre-order, it's going to be a little bit longer. We were planning to do it end of January. We've decided instead to do it a little bit closer to when the actual items will be shipping. They're firming up their production schedule now, so it's not going to be immediately, but it's still coming.
So is the design final? Can I ask a question? What?
I think it's pretty finalized.
Okay, like the really big one, right? Like
Yeah.
the screen one and everything.
In fact, isn't it people from SciTech here who send these?
I'm not sure.
There are folks from here today, actually.
Oh, is that the guys that were? Oh, okay.
So
Got some guys walking around. I had no idea who they were. They seemed important.
Yes, they seem very important. We don't know who they are.
Yeah, whatever.
All right. Integrated voice chat. Have there been any thoughts about that? I know a lot of people have seen this. There's a tech demo where there's positional audio where you hear people farther away, and when they get farther away.
Oh,
the
sure,
voice
but
turns
yeah,
into
I mean
voice tones, stuff like that.
that's not. And I totally write that off like it's an easy thing. A lot of the voice chat stuff does that already. So TeamSpeak it's a great example actually. TeamSpeak, you can set any of the users to be in a different 3D sort of area. So if I'm playing with you, I'd have you behind or over the right hand or wherever. For us to know where the other players are that are speaking is super easy. I mean, we know that pretty much all the time. And within your vicinity, we know it even more accurately. So absolutely we can do this. The CryEngine already has a voice over IP system within it. The quality is not really where anybody's happy with it right now. And actually the bandwidth is pretty high. So we had talked to a couple vendors that have different, tech for this kind of stuff, and really in the end we've just kind of decided that we'll just do our own. It makes a lot of sense to just do our own. Now, will it support the 3D position audio? That's going to be a must. So it's definitely going to have to. If you're piloting a ship and again, Connie, it's a good example. You got two co-pilots, right? And this guy says something. Yes, definitely, it has to come out of the right ear. I mean, it's going to sound absolutely ridiculous if it's just a disembodied sort of voice. Where things get even crazier is some of the ideas that have been floated around about runtime facial stuff, where it's, you know, the guy is talking and you look over and his guy's flappy lips sort of thing.
Yeah,
and
your webcam is recording your face, and as you move
exactly.
your mouth,
So there's little bits and pieces of R&D on this, like, and it might surprise you to know that a lot of our facial animators will just capture their own faces a lot of the times when they're testing stuff. They're just with their webcams, sure. I mean, actually in the Bishop Tech demo, there's a big range of motion that he does. That was all captured from the facial animator, from his webcam. So I mean, all that tech exists. It's just, what's the priority of it? Not that high right now. We know we can do it. It's going to benefit the players better when there's a better party system, when that's a little more clear. I mean, it's a bit cart before the horse right now. So do we know how we'll do it? Yeah, we have a pretty good idea. So.
A better party system. Is there a better party system coming to Star Citizen?
There will be eventually, absolutely. But here's the thing: the party system still doesn't work as it's designed, right? The contact system is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. This is one of my biggest frustrations with the game right now, because I mean, we don't have to reinvent the wheel on this, is my opinion. You know, there's a bunch of, MSN doesn't exist anymore, but Skype, Yahoo Messenger, I mean, a billion different communication messaging systems that have been created before, and there's no reason for us to reinvent the wheel, so we should just be kind of doing what works. So for me, that's a big frustration, but that's got to come online before you even worry about some of that VoIP stuff. So, yeah.
All right. Got time for a couple more questions. What important tech are you not sure about? What important tech are you not yet sure about will work?
That's a great question, because it's kind of our job to know how each, and Jesus, you got
On the roof?
elephants on the roof. Sorry, I know we shouldn't even.
Aaron has
react to
sent
stuff
people
around
to
there.
stop us from answering this question.
It's yeah. That's a tough one. I'm gonna have to think a couple minutes about that, and in doing that, I'll just fill the air with words. Normally, our job is to know how we're gonna attack something, and I mean, really, very seldom do we just jump into something and have zero idea with a naive level of sort of development. The stuff that scares me the most is the stuff that we don't know that we don't know, and I know that sounds kind of, nebulous, but that's the stuff that bites us. Is when you're not sure when you don't know about a problem that's going to be coming, because if you already know that this problem is going to come, you have some sort of solution that we can come up with, and we've done that in almost every case.
That's universal to all game development.
Absolutely.
All human thought, really.
Sure. And those are the things that scare me the most. So if I was to answer the question, I would say the stuff that we have not yet seen that it is going to be a problem, that's the stuff that I'm the most worried about, and that I don't know how to solve, because I don't know what the problem is.
Well, that's why they call it, one of the reasons why they call it game development, not game building.
Yeah.
We're not there's no blueprint at the very beginning. We're just building what somebody else has already figured out.
No.
Just A to B to C to D. We are discovering and exploring the solutions and the options that we have towards making the game throughout the entire process.
Yeah.
And we will be right up to the point where we release the game, and even after that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most of us want to just keep building up on stuff, and if any one of these developers got 6 months to work on one thing, they would come up with so many different things. And again, it's really about triaging how much time you can allow them to spend on certain pieces of tech.
Okay. Will local gravity in a system ever affect the performance of a ship? Like when a ship gets closer to a planetary body, a star, a planet, or something, maybe just a really big asteroid.
We all want this, yeah. We do. What it'll be is, I can't believe I'm even calling this a smaller scale, will be on a planetary scale originally. So as you approach a planet, that's when it's going to do something. the ranges I couldn't even begin to tell you about. Likely what you'll see is that when you start doing the atmosphere entries, that's when you'll be affected by that planet's gravity. Now, are you going to be affected as you just approach it? Is there going to be a station orbiting? Not out of the gate. There's a lot of problems to solve in there, and one of the biggest ones is just relative velocities. Because if you've got a space station, orbiting a planet that's the space station's moving at, whatever, 13,000 miles an hour, and your ship only really moves at 300, how do you ever get to the station, right? It will always outrun you, things like this, unless you then have, some level of gravity that will give you a gravity assist, give you the velocity to actually catch up to that and be in that same frame of reference. But it opens up so many problems. So originally, out of the gate, you can look forward to the planets, yes, having some gravity that will affect you as you get close, and I'm talking pretty close, but not when you're super far away or anything like that. Now, having said that, we've got all sorts of tech online for gravity wells, gravity streams. So whether there's like a nebula that has weird gravity within it, whether there's a black hole that sucks you in. There's all sorts of different things that we can do with gravity right now. We just don't have the designs really solidified for what they all need to do, is the thing. But we've got all the tech online to do that stuff with, and it could absolutely be done.
Would there ever be a ship that could affect another ship by proximity? Not
like just in terms of its
contact,
mass, or it's like a weapon or something.
Like the Vandal King ship or something like that. Is that?
I'm
not a physics person.
I'm a little bit, and I'm not sure that it would even have mass enough to do that. What do I know though? How much does a King ship weigh?
50 pounds at least.
Lots, over 9,000, easy. So yeah, no, that's a good question. I doubt that you'll see it on the ships though. Yeah. It just doesn't really make a lot of sense unless that ship is just gigantic. I would think though, if there's a weapon of some sort,
like a gravity generator, like gravity well generator.
Yeah, that'd be super cool.
It's sort of what an interdictor is though, isn't it?
Like not really sure.
Interdiction ships create artificial gravity wells to pull things out of.
I don't know anything about interdiction ships yet, Jared.
I'm just talking about in sci-fi, in general sci-fi, not specifically to Star Citizen.
I think that'd be cool. I think it'd be cool to have weapons that actually modify the gravity in certain areas. That'd be cool.
Somebody was asking how we test multi-crew functionality if the lobby system sucks so much. It's because we don't test on live servers. We test on internal builds with internal servers, where we don't have to fight with anybody to get in.
That's kind of the win there. And also, we can increase the player count as we need to internally. It's a pretty quick CVAR for us to change that.
All right, let's look for a last question because we are pretty much out of time already.
That was fast.
Yeah. That's why we like these ones. That's why we invited you. It's like we bring you in. It's a day off for us.
Cool.
It's a day off for us.
It's great.
Are you impressed with how far Star Citizen has pushed CryEngine? Did you think it would ever be used in this context?
In this context, i.e., like solar system scaled, no. Even at the original onset when I was demoing the engine for Chris, years ago. The scale of the game was smaller, right? We never expected to do a solar system scale or anything to this sort of effect. I'm super impressed with where the engine has gone with this, and in fact, it's very little. There's still CryEngine in there, but there's so many improvements across the board that I'm super. I say super a lot. I'm really impressed with, anyways. One of the biggest ones is the local physics grid stuff. It's a unique sort of selling point within Star Citizen. It's a unique feature that I've not seen in any other game. Yeah. And that by itself, just experiencing that was really, really, really cool to see. Additionally, there's so many changes around there. The 32-bit inverse depth buffer stuff, so that we can actually render out to that sort of distance. And then when I first loaded the procedural planet, when it had terrain streaming working all properly, the scale, I've gotten so used to working on, really, really, they're small now. An 8-kilometer level to me was massive, right? Because if you're talking terrain and just running around as a guy, that's a lot of terrain. to work with. So the scale just boggled, and it's not even mind-boggling. It really screwed up my sense of perception, even in the editor, because I might be working around and I've got this planet there, and it just looks like a little sphere or whatever. And I start zooming in. I'm zooming in. I've got to turn up my camera to 1,000 meters a second, and just to give you an idea of like the amount of change that goes on in the engine. We have these little buttons for camera speed, and we had 0.001, 0.1, and 10, or a 1 and 10.
Yeah.
So we've had to now add 100, 1,000, and we even have a 10,000 one, but there's no reason for that yet. It's just crazy the scale differences to sort of wrap your head around. So yeah, I'm super impressed with the stuff that's been done to the engine, and no, I never expected to see it to this scale, I guess, is the answer.
Well, cool. That wraps up the January special subscriber edition of RTV.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Sean Tracy, for
You're very
coming
welcome.
on and taking over and letting us sit here and pick your brain.
It's exciting stuff. I love this stuff. This is
Around the Verse is tomorrow. Regular RTV will return on Friday. We'll see if we can't get some of our special visitors to pop in, maybe. And anything else you want to add before we sign off?
I got a little bit of housekeeping too.
Sure.
Let's see. Folks have been asking about the package split between Star Citizen Squadron 42. It is not happening January, but we do have a date now, which will be February 14th. And we'll reiterate all of these on Around the Verse and that other show. We reverse the verse later in the week, but give people a heads up as best we can. The one-time used melt tokens for the
Buyback store
are going to be distributed on Friday. That's going to let you bring back one ship package, whatever, with store credit. It's one-time use only, so be careful what you decide. What else? I feel like there was a third thing. I don't remember what it is, though. Maybe there's not a third thing. All right, we'll see you guys very soon.
All right, guys. Take care.
Thank you.